It's self-management of, for the 2 million people in Scotland who live with a long-term health condition. Many of these folk have more than one long-term health condition. That's 40% currently, approximately, of Scotland's population. And it covers an enormous domain of health issues. And the reason this is such a big deal is that it's actually only going to get more of a problem for our health service. In fact, it's probably going to become unmanageable for the way the health service is now. And that's because we're getting better at curing people of the things that used to kill us. So we're living longer and getting more of these things. So a lot of these things relate to lifestyles, more or less. And we've also got this thing that's usually called the population explosion, the democratic time bomb, with all the baby boomers getting older. So there's going to be relatively fewer young people who are going to work and pay for our pensions and for looking after us all when we're all decrepit. There's a bit of controversy around that, which is quite interesting, but that's the kind of generally accepted view. So the health service actually can't keep up with actually caring, giving the kind of care for all these things. So the jargon word with the professionals is this thing called self-management. Because actually, if you have one of these health issues, you generally do most of the management yourself. You actually treat yourself, if you like. You have very, very small contact with the healthcare professionals. And not only do you do a lot of things for yourself, but you become an expert, and as such you are a useful resource for other people. So that's part of the idea, is to try and tap into people as resources for all this. So that's where the project comes from. It's funded by the NHS, but it's kind of taken off because it's operating really a bit outside the NHS, the normal NHS sphere. This is one of my colleagues, Andy Hyde, did some early sort of pilot work around the project, acting as a mystery shopper type thing, pretending to be someone with arthritis. He would cycle up on his bike, and although actually, sadly, ironically, he was kind of stuck with something similar shortly after that. But he went round and he produced a couple of these pictures, and this is the kind of archetypal thing for local information, the local notice board, and he produced this slide to get the idea over of what he saw, which was really giving people a search box onto their notice boards around the place. So what we've done, really, to cut a long story short, is to develop a web-based platform which will we talked the NHS into doing this, which wouldn't have been their normal way of doing it. They just set up a whacking great database or lots of local websites and things. So what we've done quite successfully is set up a project which has built a platform which will index effectively things that are either on or offline and might be useful local information resources for this domain. And that's been it's gone down pretty well with a lot of people, because there are so many people who actually want to generate this stuff but also to use it across lots and lots of different settings, and they're kind of stuck for any other way to do it. So probably the hardest part of the project hasn't been doing it, but actually to talk to non-technical people and talk about a thing which is a platform or a web-based infrastructure which you would access through an API and all this. So we've tried loads and loads of different kind of metaphors for doing it, but functionally the thing has the kind of three phases. So we collect stuff either by people submitting it, or by web scraping, or by where we have friendly local directory providers, we get data directly. The middle bit has emerged as really probably the most interesting bit of the project, which is that we started out off really looking at just how we could collect all this stuff all over the country and have it in one big virtual bucket. And so we were ready with the idea that lots of people would contribute and all that. But there was a big issue right all the way along, was that the NHS puts a lot of money into health information. So if you want to know what is diabetes, or what are the best treatments for diabetes and all that, then you want to go to an authorised source, and they've got that all set up. What we're after is what you do after that. What do I do? What kind of things are going on locally? Where might I meet people that I could talk to or benefit from their experience and all that? And that's all very, very uncontrolled if you're used to a kind of more bureaucratic way of working and control. And we've had quite a struggle with that. But there was a great moment. It was the very first workshop we ran just up the road from here, about 18 months ago, and this whole thing came up, and this bloke said, I represent a mental health group, and if you want to know the best people to tell you whether resources are useful or not for people with mental health problems are the people in my group. And that just kind of shut everyone up. So the whole way of working with the thing is to try and let people curate their own data and metadata and all that. And lastly, we publish it via an API, although we've also got a website. To give you an idea of the kind of sort of community involvement, we did a bit of work with a couple of schools just as a pilot. The Curriculum for Excellence came up earlier on. A couple of schools did some projects where they got the kids going out locally to see what was going on locally in terms of health related resources and all that. So we're also doing, we're working with, there's a group of, I think it's the 100 health practices in the most deprived areas in Scotland, called the Deep End Project. Have you come across that?
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah, apparently out of 100, about 90 odd are in Glasgow. And what they did a project called the Links Project, and they recognised that it's if you go in and see a doctor and you discover you're told you've got diabetes, and you wander out in a state of shock, the doc's giving you a prescription for something, and you think, well, what the hell do I do now? So they set up a project where they had somebody who would take you by the hand and sit you down and say, right, you need to go to a pharmacist, that's your prescription, are you going to be eligible for a free prescription? Of course we all are. And that kind of thing. So they developed someone who was really a kind of resource, who knew where to point you and where to make connections for you and all that. So what they did obviously was collect a whole load of information resources about things that were in that practice area. So the logical next step is that we're working with them to bring all this stuff in and make it available as a resource in their practice. And of course, if we can pull it in that way, then it's available to everybody to use. Doing another project with Renfrewshire Libraries, which is quite interesting, with ALISS. Anyone know ALISS, the Research in Social Services, or something, Institute for Research. Anyway, not got really long. So we've got a website where you can kind of play around with whatever data we've got, and we're gathering location stuff. The one of the issues we've got, which we haven't really tackled yet, is that point location is kind of pointless a lot of the time for this stuff. Supposing you have limited mobility and you've got some sort of health issue, and you want to make contact with someone who might come in, be a bit of company, do a bit of shopping for you. There might be a local thing there, so you could look it up, with your postcode, find something down the road. But there might also be a national project which would, find someone in your area, or a virtual project which has no location at all. So rather than locations, it's kind of the other way around. We're looking at how accessible something is, whether it's accessible locally, not so much where it might be physically located. And we've kind of dodged that just now. It's more an issue, a kind of conceptual issue, I think, in terms of folk curating stuff and accessing it. The data is, well, our data model seems to cover it quite straightforwardly. We've also got a bookmark where people can tag stuff and put it in. The web setup, very quickly, we're all open source. All the engine code that we produce is all open source as well. It's on GitHub. We've got a Django server with Postgres SQL for local accounts. We're using MongoDB for the database, which has been great for reasons I'll come back to, and Solar for the indexing. So our model is pretty simple. When we get a new resource, there's a fairly small bit of metadata that goes in, and then we have this thing called a curation, which is where if you're the first person to put a resource in, you then add your own metadata on, and that can be pretty much free form, and that's where the Mongo document store, NoSQL type database is very good. And the reason for adopting this kind of model, people can then add other curations on top. And there can be any number of curations which are then lumped together in the index. The reason for adopting this is that you might have something, say, well, your example of a walk that you did, you mapped out a local walk. So I might have be part of a group that has from like stroke people, folk who've had strokes. So I might think, want to map this as a resource locally for this. But then someone else might come along from a mental health group and might be interested in exercise and doing it that. So lots of people might identify the same resource and actually have quite different things to say about it. So rather than go for like the Wikipedia thing, where we might have like one thing, a resource, and kind of open season on editing, we've adopted this thing where people can layer on their own metadata on top. And actually, I wouldn't say it was entirely by plan, slightly accidental. That's actually worked out pretty well for a lot of things. Here's some examples of taken from a directory in Grampian, and it's a typical kind of SQL type database. It's got all these completely bonkers fields and things. So we can store all that just in a kind of blob, a dictionary, a hash in the MongoDB, and use it for whatever is. Here's a nice tidy one from Renfrewshire Libraries. So then we can lump all that metadata together into one entry in Solar, and people can look things up and we're using the development, the trunk of Solar with Lucene. Anyone familiar with these things? It's got geolocation in it now, which is great. And yeah, but another interesting thing, coming back to this notion of people having their own curations and things, we've kind of again stumbled on this has been quite useful in allowing people to have the API supporting searches of things which have been curated by a particular account on the system, and that has all kinds of implications which we really haven't explored, but the potential there is for a kind of social networking type setup where people can either, the simplest application is that people put their own stuff in and then can pull it out so you can search your own stuff, a bit like delicious bookmarks or that kind of thing. But beyond that, you then have the idea, the possibility of linking up accounts, and you have sort of networks of trust and all that, which is a big issue with NHS. These slides are from a kind of scenario from another presentation, but the idea, if you had somebody working for a local charity, and then there was another group in another part of the country the accounts could actually be lumped together and aggregated in some way. And we're looking at building tools to help people work in these groups on the curation aspects. So we're looking at the ideas of having mentorship for curation of metadata. We've also got interest from citizens' advice folk who are dead keen on this, because they do this all the time. So we have the possibility of linking up accounts like that. Oops. So the project's been a wee bit different for kind of NHS thing, in that it's as I say, it's all open source. It's been agile is usually the word we use. It's interesting how IT folk can look at you very, very suspiciously when you don't have big specifications and all these kind of things. And as soon as you say agile now, they say, "Oh yeah, agile." So the NHS has sort of funded it and guided it with a fairly in a fairly relaxed manner, and it's set to be hopefully the implementation proper will start over the next few months, and it's going to be hosted by the Long-Term Conditions Alliance Scotland. That's the plan at the moment, who have their office just round the corner from here. I just thought
yeah, we're sort of launches and sort of now really, but
I could summarise in a few minutes.
And then we'll just,
there were three things I thought in terms of connecting this with other things going on. The first thing is that, as I said, it's an infrastructure project, a kind of platform. So we're kind of spawning and trying to connect up with as many local projects as we can. So we do have a lot of contacts into a lot of these local communities, if you like, who have a big interest in mapping resources. And I didn't get to the thing yesterday, but I picked up from the live blog, the wheelmap.org. Folk seen that at all? Now, when you go to the .org, you go to, I think it's just a German project, isn't it?
Yeah.
So is it Stuttgart or somewhere? Or, well, it's a German city anyway, and it's got all these things mapped all over the place, and there's loads and loads of different colours because it's been active. You can you can look at the centre of Glasgow, and they're all grey because they're all unknown status, because the date, folk haven't got engaged and all that. But I mean, there's just I think what interests me is just what a neat, approachable, kind of usable kind of tool. It's dead simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think if we can develop tools that are kind of like this, that let people basically add data to these kind of shareable maps of what's going on locally, and I think there's loads of ways that we could help out with that. The other thing is, there's loads of stuff going on in health and social sector just now, which have got map or mapping in the title, but they're all about producing pictures. And I think we need to shift from the idea of a map as a sort of picture that you do as part of some work to actually getting data out of it. And one example, a big thing now is asset mapping. This is done by ALISS, and so they're doing workshops with people, and it sounds really, really similar to what you're doing, except it's got a health focus most of the time. But they're working with people, and so
yeah, totally amazing.
yeah. So there's a kind of physical kind of map. So there's that, and then lastly, national projects. I think we're seeing slowly a shift. Some of you will know better than me in terms of sort of centrally funded projects from moving towards this kind of open or linked data. And here's a cracker. This is NHS funded thing called Active Scotland, where you type in your location and put Sauchiehall Street in, and you get a list of things where there's something active going on that's local to you. Now, this was done as a standalone project. It was funded it's over the last few years, and basically they're kind of stuck. They don't know what to do with it, or maybe they do now, but a few months ago they didn't know what to do with it, because they paid an agency in Edinburgh to do the web development, and it's very spiffy, very nice, but they're also paying people to administer the data and to sort through, you know, and I mean, you're sitting there sort of saying, what's going on? So there's just this huge aching need for any work like this, any particularly public money that goes into this kind of thing, to produce something that is shareable, but also that we can add to. And it's been, as a newcomer to OpenStreetMap, it's been great to find that there actually is this huge project going on that's addressing this. So it's kind of, I think there's huge scope for us to use OSM and also to contribute to it. I'm particularly interested in developing the tools that would let our communities actually put their data in a way that it can go into your metadata. So that'll do.
Okay.